Hey everybody, how's it going? Welcome back to Copper Jacket TV. So I honestly can't believe that I'm making another video about California, but California just doesn't want to leave the Second Amendment alone. They just want to keep messing with it until it no longer exists. Well, you guys remember I made a video just a few days ago talking about how certain counties in the state of California are charging people upwards of $1,000 to get a permit and making them wait extreme amounts of time if they ever get it. Well, now we have SB 2, which was just recently amended, read a second time, and is now in committee, and it looks like this is the version that California is going to pass, and that's basically going to make what's happening in those counties go statewide, but maybe even worse. So let's talk about what SB 2 is going to do now that it is amended. This channel is proud to be sponsored by the USCCA. Listen, if you do plan on carrying for your own defense, you need a USCCA membership. With your membership, you get that self-defense liability insurance, which is absolutely priceless, and a bunch of other great things. So check out the link down below. Join the USCCA today. Okay, so let's go and talk about what's going on here. So since I made that last video talking about the extreme fees that were being charged in some California counties, let's go ahead and talk about the fees that are associated with SB 2. Again, this is an amended version of SB 2 that was read twice and is now in committee. This is the one that looks like it will more than likely pass, and there's some pretty big fees that are associated with it and some changes that were made as well. So starting off with the fees, the first thing that we have to look at is somebody that's new getting your permit for the first time, right? So the person who's new getting it for the first time is going to have to do 16 hours of training, whereas somebody who's getting a renewal is going to have to do 8 hours. So the fees incurred for a renewal versus somebody who's getting it for the first time are going to be different. But the first thing you have to look at is going to be the psych evaluation. So if you go through this process, you're going to have to get a psych evaluation under SB 2. And as part of that, the way that it used to be written before it was amended, it was going to be up to $150. So basically, SB 2 capped the cost for somebody at $150. Well, guess what? They struck that out. Okay, so now it's no longer up to $150, and now it says this. Now you can see here we have three different colors of text. The black text means that it wasn't changed. The red text with the strike through it is from the previous version of SB 2, and the blue text is going to be from the newest updated amended version of SB 2. So it says the applicant may be charged for the actual cost of the testing, and this is stricken out here, of the testing in an amount not to exceed $150. Now they amended that, and now it says in no case shall the amount charged to the applicant for the psychological assessment exceed the reasonable cost of the licensing authority. So let's just face it, psychologists are very expensive. So what they're saying there is that, well, 150 bucks probably isn't going to be enough to cover it. So instead of limiting it to 150 bucks, we're just going to say as long as it's a reasonable amount. But what's a reasonable amount to you? What's a reasonable amount to them? Is it instead of 150, is it going to be 250, 350, 450? I mean, it just depends on what they think reasonable is. You may have saved every penny that you have just to go through this process, and another 10 bucks is not even reasonable. But again, they're raising the fees. Now, on top of that, there's multiple other fees. It seems like everybody gets a cut here. The state gets cut, the county gets cut, the city gets cut, you know, the local sheriff's department gets cut, the county gets a cut, everybody has a cut. And it seems like there's just fees upon fees upon fees. I mean, I wouldn't be surprised if they had a fee for a fee, basically a tax for having so many fees. It's ridiculous when you look at the amount of money that it's going to cost. 16 hours of training, all the stuff they have to go through, the background checks, the fingerprinting, you know, everything that you need to do in order to get a permit out there has some type of fee associated with it. Now, the fee is going to be more on your first time because, again, you have 16 hours of training versus the 8 for a renewal, so it's going to be higher the first time. But even on the second time around, if they determine that you need to go through a psychological evaluation, because now through SB 2, they're going to be looking at all of your social media and, you know, trying to get a gauge on whether or not you're a problem or something like that. And if they look at your social media and they don't like something that you said on a post or whatever, they can request psychological evaluation even on a renewal. So even though you've had a permit already and you've had it for years, through your renewal, you could have to do it all over again. Now, I'm sure you remember how Bruin got rid of good cause and just cause. They basically said it was unconstitutional because you shouldn't have to show some type of good cause or just cause to practice a right. And so they deemed that unconstitutional, and they changed a lot of other stuff as well. So California, New York, and other states that had some type of good or just cause had to get rid of it. And so they struck that out in SB 2. You no longer have to show good cause or just cause, basically proving that there's some type of, you know, extra need to have this permit. But they also added, at the time at least, good moral character. So instead of good cause, they added good moral character. You had to prove to them that you were a good person. And of course, that was subjective to the person who was actually conducting the interview. Well, in SB2's new amended version, they've gotten rid of good moral character. I think they know that that would be challenged the same as good cause or just cause. So they went ahead and they struck that out and they replaced it with basically you have to be somebody who is eligible to be able to receive a permit, or somebody who's eligible to own one. As long as you're eligible, then you've met those needs. So that's good. You know, I guess if you're trying to look at the bright side of things, good moral character and good cause were both taken out of SB2. Now, SB2 also eases up on some of those sensitive locations that we were hearing about in the very beginning. So in the very beginning, it was pretty much you couldn't carry anywhere. You couldn't really leave the house because chances are you were either going to pass by or enter in some type of restricted zone. And so now with SB2, it's a lot of the same stuff that you're used to, right? Federal buildings, you know, state buildings, things like that, schools, off limits. Those things are off limits. That is, unless you use public or mass transit. If you use public transit, forget about it. You're pretty much out of luck. If you use public transit to go to work, if you use public transit to go to the store, to go to the laundromat, whatever it is, you're not allowed to carry in public transit. As a matter of fact, you're not even allowed on, you know, some of the other areas surrounding public transit. And so if you're somebody who relies on that, which is probably going to be somebody who's also going to want to rely on their own self-defense, you're going to be out of luck because that's one of the sensitive locations that they left in place. But they did kind of streamline it on some other things. So if you're not somebody who relies on the bus or, you know, mass transit in some way, then you can still carry just about everywhere as long as you stay away from places that pretty much were off limits before anyway. Now, SB2 is a very long and confusing bill with a multitude of penal codes, and a lot of those penal codes refer you to other penal codes in order to understand what they're saying in that penal code, and so you're left kind of hunting back and forth to understand what each paragraph is saying within SB2. Sometimes I feel like you need a Harvard law degree just to understand what they're doing here. So, you know, how is the 70-year-old grandmother who just wants to be able to protect herself going to understand what she needs to do, or at least understand the law in general? It is so ridiculous, I can't even tell you. I mean, once you go to the course, right, to take your 16 hours if it's your first time, 8 hours if you're second, you know, the instructor has to explain all of this to you. It's in SB2 that the instructor is supposed to give you the knowledge within SB2 so that you have at least a basic understanding of it, you know, before a permit is issued. So that's all on the instructor, and that's a lot to take in. It's a lot to teach, and it's just ridiculous, especially considering the fact that the Supreme Court said that we have a right to carry outside of the home for our protection. How is this not a direct infringement of that? Now, I understand, you know, that they say that the First Amendment is, you know, you can have reasonable rules and restrictions against it, just like the Second Amendment, reasonable rules and restrictions. That's even what the Supreme Court has said in the past. But how reasonable is this? I mean, to me, shall not be infringed is a period, right? That's the end of it right there. You're not allowed to infringe it. Period. There's nothing written after it. It doesn't say that it shall not be infringed as long as, or if it's just a little bit. It doesn't say anything like that. So how is this not an infringement for you protecting yourself outside the home? If you have to spend all of this time outside of work, you have to spend all of that money, you know, doing your fingerprints and your background checks, your evaluations, your training, and everything else that you have to do, then the waiting period, right? The extensive waiting period in order to actually get the permit in hand, because going without it, even if you were to leave the house without it, let's say you accidentally left it in your car and you were walking around, you don't have it on your person, that's a violation of the penal code in SB2 right there. So there's a lot to understand, and it's just, it really is out there. It really is out there. So I wanted to let you guys know about it. If you're interested in reading it, I will put a link directly down to the amended version of SB2 down in the description box. You guys can check it out for yourself. But it's, if you plan on doing this, I suggest you read it. That's all I could say, because California, I feel like they've built in a bunch of traps there, and there's definitely a bunch of pitfalls you might not even be aware of. So anyway, I want to thank you all very much for watching. I really do appreciate it. Please like, subscribe. You guys have a great day.